Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as she folded the last of her belongings into a worn carpet bag. The bruise on her left cheek had faded to a sickly yellow, but the memory of how she got it remained fresh as morning dew. 3 years of marriage to Daniel Mitchell had taught her that love was supposed to hurt, that silence kept you safe, and that dreams were dangerous things best left abandoned. She had believed him when he said no one else would want her. She had believed him when he said she deserved his anger. But when his fists found their way to her stomach last Tuesday, threatening the child she carried, something ancient and primal awakened inside her. The baby hadn't survived the night. Sarah had buried that hope in the garden behind their Boston townhouse, her tears mixing with the cold October rain. Daniel had left for his gentleman's club, unconcerned with her grief, and in that moment of solitude, clarity struck like lightning. She would die here if she stayed. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually, Daniel's rage would finish what it had started. The thought didn't frighten her anymore. What frightened her was the numbness spreading through her chest, the way she had started to believe his words, to see herself through his hateful eyes. The newspaper advertisement had seemed like Providence itself. Respectable women needed for marriage in the Dakota Territory. Honest men seeking companions for a hard but honest life. Transport provided. Sarah had torn out the page, hidden it beneath her mattress, and spent 2 weeks gathering courage like pennies in a jar. She wrote her response in the public library where Daniel would never think to look for her, her handwriting shaky but determined. The reply came from a Mr. Thomas Whitfield, a school teacher in a settlement called Broken Creek. His letter was kind, almost gentle, asking about her interests and assuring her he sought a partner, not a servant. Now, at 24 years old, Sarah was preparing to leave everything she knew. Her mother had died when she was 16. Her father had remarried within 6 months and made it clear Sarah was no longer welcome in his new life. Daniel had seemed like salvation then, with his fine clothes and practiced charm. How quickly salvation had turned to damnation. She left no note of explanation. Daniel didn't deserve her words, and she had none left to give him anyway. The train ticket to Dakota Territory was pressed against her heart, tucked safely in her dress pocket. The journey west took 5 days. Sarah watched the landscape transform through the train window, the crowded cities giving way to endless plains that stretched toward horizons she had only read about in books. Other passengers chatted and laughed, but Sarah remained silent, nursing her invisible wounds. An elderly woman named Mrs. Chen sat beside her on the 3rd day and shared rice cakes wrapped in cloth. She didn't ask about the fading bruises or the sadness Sarah wore like a second skin. Instead, she told stories about her own journey from China, about reinvention and second chances, about how the West had a way of letting people become who they were always meant to be. Sarah arrived in Broken Creek on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The settlement was smaller than she had imagined, just a handful of buildings clustered along a dirt road, with the vast prairie spreading out in every direction. The sky seemed impossibly large, almost oppressive in its openness. Thomas Whitfield was waiting at the station, exactly as he had described himself in his letters, tall, thin, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a nervous smile. But before Sarah could step down from the platform, a commotion erupted at the edge of town. A group of Lakota riders had appeared, and suddenly Sarah's carefully planned escape was about to become something else entirely. The townspeople scattered like startled birds, rushing into buildings and slamming doors. Thomas Whitfield grabbed Sarah's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh in a way that made her stomach clench with familiar fear. "Come quickly," he hissed, dragging her toward the schoolhouse. But Sarah's feet wouldn't move. She had spent 3 years running from violence, and she was exhausted by fear. The riders weren't attacking. They sat calmly on their horses, 7 men with quiet dignity, waiting for something. The lead rider caught her attention immediately. He sat straight and proud, his long black hair adorned with eagle feathers, his face marked with the kind of strength that came from endurance rather than cruelty. "Miss Mitchell, we must go inside," Thomas insisted, his voice rising with panic. Sarah pulled her arm free, surprised by her own boldness. "They're just sitting there," she said. "They haven't done anything." Thomas's face flushed red. "They are savages. Indians. You don't understand what they are capable of." The word savages struck Sarah like a slap. She had been called many things by Daniel: stupid, worthless, broken. She recognized the poison of prejudice because she had drunk from that well herself. The lead rider's eyes met hers across the distance. They were dark and deep, filled with an intelligence that contradicted everything Thomas had just said. The settlement's mayor emerged from the general store, his round belly preceding him like a warning. He approached the riders with visible reluctance, stopping a respectful distance away. "Chief Two Hawks," he said, his voice carrying across the silent street. "We weren't expecting you until next week." The man Thomas had called a savage slid from his horse with fluid grace. "The winter comes early," Chief Two Hawks replied in perfect English, his voice like river stones smoothed by water. "My people need the supplies we traded for. The contract says payment on delivery." He gestured to several pack horses laden with furs and beadwork. Sarah watched the exchange with growing fascination. This was not the violent confrontation she had been warned about. This was business, conducted with more dignity than she had witnessed in Boston's finest establishments. The mayor sputtered and made excuses about having to check his ledgers, but Chief Two Hawks simply waited, patient as stone. Something in his stillness reminded Sarah of prayer, of the quiet moments in church when the world seemed to hold its breath. Thomas had abandoned his attempt to drag Sarah away and now stood behind her, muttering under his breath about proper timing and inconvenience. The negotiation continued for several minutes, with the mayor eventually agreeing to honor the contract. As the townspeople emerged from their hiding places, curiosity replacing fear, Chief Two Hawks' gaze returned to Sarah. This time he studied her more carefully, and Sarah felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with vulnerability. It was as if he could see past her carefully maintained composure to the bruises that lived beneath her skin. She should have looked away. Proper ladies didn't stare at men, especially not Indian chiefs. But Sarah was tired of propriety, tired of rules designed to keep her small and silent. Chief Two Hawks walked toward her, and the crowd gasped collectively. Thomas stepped forward, positioning himself between Sarah and the approaching chief. "Stay back," Thomas warned, his voice shaking. "This woman is spoken for." Chief Two Hawks stopped, but his eyes never left Sarah's face. "A woman who carries such sadness should not be spoken for by a man who carries such fear," he said quietly. The words landed like arrows, precise and true. Sarah felt tears threaten, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in her life. She wouldn't cry here, not in front of strangers, not when she was supposed to be starting fresh. "I'm fine," Sarah said, finding her voice. It came out stronger than she expected, surprising even herself. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm perfectly fine." Chief Two Hawks tilted his head slightly, and something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "The hawk does not ask the sparrow if she wishes to fly," he said. "She already knows the sky is her home." Before Sarah could respond, he turned and walked back to his people. The Lakota riders collected their supplies and departed as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind a town buzzing with nervous energy and a woman whose carefully constructed plans had just shifted like sand beneath her feet. That night, in the small room above the general store that Thomas had arranged for her, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Chief Two Hawks' face, the way he had looked at her without pity, without judgment, just recognition. As if he had seen someone real standing there, not the broken thing Daniel had convinced her she was. Through her window, she could see the prairie stretching endlessly under the moonlight, and for the first time in years, she felt something stirring in her chest that might have been hope. Sarah's wedding to Thomas Whitfield was scheduled for the following Saturday, a week away. The settlement women descended upon her with measuring tapes and advice, altering a donated dress and teaching her the names of everyone she would need to know. Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, proved particularly enthusiastic, chattering about how wonderful it was to have another educated woman in Broken Creek. But beneath their kindness, Sarah sensed evaluation, as if they were all waiting to see what kind of woman would travel so far to marry a stranger. Thomas visited her each afternoon, proper and courteous, sitting in the general store's parlor with the door appropriately open. He talked about his students, about the books he loved, about building a proper life together. He never asked about Boston, about her past, about the shadows that sometimes crossed her face. Sarah appreciated his discretion even as it troubled her. A man who didn't ask questions might also be a man who didn't truly want to know her. Still, he seemed gentle enough, and gentleness was more than she had dared hope for. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah walked to the edge of town, needing space from the suffocating attention. The prairie called to her in ways she didn't fully understand. The wind moved through the grass like breathing, and the sky stretched so vast it made her feel both insignificant and infinite. She was standing there, letting the wind tangle her carefully pinned hair, when she heard horses approaching. Chief Two Hawks rode alone this time, sitting easy in his saddle like he and the horse shared one body. "You should not wander so far from the settlement," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "There are dangers on the prairie for those who do not know its ways." Sarah lifted her chin. "Are you one of those dangers?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Chief Two Hawks smiled, and the expression transformed his face from stern to almost playful. "I am the least of your dangers, Sarah Mitchell. Your greatest danger wears a kind face and speaks gentle words while his spirit carries storms." The words sent ice through Sarah's veins. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Chief Two Hawks dismounted, moving with that same fluid grace she had noticed before. He kept distance between them, non-threatening but present. "I know bruises," he said quietly. "I know the look of someone who has learned to make herself small. I know what it is to survive by becoming invisible." Sarah's breath caught. No one had named it before, this thing she had been doing. "Thomas is a good man," she said, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "Good is not the same as right," Chief Two Hawks replied. "I have watched Thomas Whitfield for 2 years. He teaches Lakota children in the winter when the government pays him extra. He is patient with them, kind even. But he does not see them. He sees what he wishes them to be. He will do the same with you." The truth of it resonated in Sarah's bones. She had noticed the way Thomas talked about their future, about the wife he imagined, without ever really asking what she wanted or who she actually was. "Why do you care?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me either." Chief Two Hawks was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "My wife died 3 winters ago," he finally said. "She was sick, and the white doctor would not come to our camp. He said he did not treat animals. I held her while she burned with fever, helpless as a child. I know what it is to lose someone who should have been saved. When I look at you, I see someone who is dying in a different way. I cannot watch it happen again and do nothing." The raw honesty in his words cracked something open in Sarah's chest. She felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them, great heaving sobs that she had been holding back for months, maybe years. Chief Two Hawks didn't move toward her, didn't try to comfort her with touch. He simply stood witness to her grief, honoring it with his presence. When the storm passed, Sarah felt hollowed out but strangely clean, like a wound that had finally been lanced. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. "I have nowhere else to go. No money. No family. Thomas is my only option." Chief Two Hawks shook his head slowly. "A woman who has survived what you have survived has more options than she knows. But they require courage. They require believing you deserve more than survival." He moved back toward his horse. "My people's winter camp is 3 hours north. The offer of sanctuary stands if you need it. We do not have much, but what we have, we share freely. No one will force you into anything. No one will own you." Sarah watched him ride away, his words echoing in her mind. That night, she lay awake again, but this time her sleeplessness came from possibility rather than fear. Thomas was a good man, perhaps. But Chief Two Hawks was right. Good wasn't the same as right. She thought about Daniel, about how she had mistaken control for love, about how she had nearly let herself make the same mistake again with Thomas. She thought about the endless prairie and the way Chief Two Hawks sat on his horse, free in a way she had never been. The next morning, Sarah told Thomas she needed more time before the wedding. The hurt and confusion on his face made her feel guilty, but not guilty enough to change her mind. She was done making herself small for men who couldn't see her anyway. Mrs. Patterson called her ungrateful. The other women whispered behind their hands. But Sarah felt lighter than she had in years, even as she faced the terrifying question of what came next. Sarah spent 2 days in her room above the general store, rationing the small amount of money she had left and contemplating her impossible situation. The settlement women had turned cold, their earlier warmth evaporating like morning dew. Thomas sent word through Mrs. Patterson that he would give her until Monday to reconsider, but his patience was not infinite. The unspoken threat hung in the air: comply or be cast out. Sarah recognized the trap because she had lived in one before. Different bars, same cage. On Sunday morning, Sarah packed her carpet bag once more. She had done this before, fled from Daniel with shaking hands and desperate hope. This time felt different. This time she was running toward something instead of just away. She left most of the coins she had on the dresser as payment for the room, keeping only enough for bare necessities. The general store was closed for the Sabbath, and the town was at church. Sarah had never been more grateful for religious routine. The walk north was harder than she had anticipated. Her Boston boots were ill-suited for prairie grass, and the November wind cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper. She had no compass, no map, just Chief Two Hawks' words, 3 hours north. Sarah walked steadily, ignoring the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Daniel, telling her she was being foolish, that she would die out here alone, that she was worthless without a man to guide her. She walked until her feet blistered, until the settlement disappeared behind the rolling hills, until there was nothing but grass and sky and the possibility of something different. She found the Lakota camp as the sun reached its peak. It was smaller than she had imagined, perhaps 30 lodges arranged in a loose circle, with horses grazing nearby and the smell of cooking fires drifting on the wind. Children playing with wooden toys stopped to stare at her. Women looked up from their work with curious eyes. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, suddenly aware of how she must look, a white woman, alone, exhausted, carrying everything she owned in a single bag. Ridiculous. Desperate. Lost. Chief Two Hawks emerged from one of the larger lodges. He wore simpler clothes today, practical buckskin instead of ceremonial dress, but his bearing remained regal. He showed no surprise at seeing her, just a quiet nod of acknowledgement, as if he had been expecting her all along. "You walked," he observed, noting her condition. "That was brave. Also foolish. But mostly brave." Despite everything, Sarah smiled. "I'm beginning to think bravery and foolishness might be the same thing," she said. He led her to a lodge near the center of the camp, where an elderly woman sat working on a piece of beadwork. "This is Grandmother Singing Bird," Chief Two Hawks said. "She has agreed to let you stay with her while you decide what you want to do. You are safe here. No one will question your presence or make demands of you. But you must follow our ways while you are here. We have rules that keep the community strong. Can you accept this?" Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The next weeks unfolded like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. Singing Bird spoke little English, and Sarah knew no Lakota, but they communicated through gestures and patience. Sarah learned to prepare food over an open fire, to tan hides, to mend clothes with intricate beadwork. The work was harder than anything she had done in Boston, but it was honest work, and no one struck her for doing it wrong. When she made mistakes, Singing Bird would demonstrate again, gentle and persistent. Chief Two Hawks visited each evening, teaching Sarah basic Lakota words and telling her stories about his people. She learned that his name came from a vision he had experienced as a young man, where two hawks had shown him the path between war and peace. She learned that his wife, Bright Moon, had been a healer who had taught him to see illness not just in the body but in the spirit. She learned that he carried his grief like sacred cargo, heavy but purposeful. Sarah told him her own story in fragments, testing how much truth she could speak aloud. She told him about Daniel's fists and the baby she had lost. She told him about the numbness that had crept into her soul, about believing she deserved pain because she had been told so many times she did. Chief Two Hawks listened without interrupting, without offering easy comfort or hollow reassurances. When she finished, he said simply, "Your husband was a small man made smaller by fear. He hurt you because hurting you was the only way he could feel powerful. That is his weakness, not yours." The words released something in Sarah she hadn't known was bound. For the first time, she began to separate Daniel's poison from her own truth. She wasn't broken. She had been broken by someone else. The distinction seemed small but felt monumental. As December arrived and the prairie turned white with snow, Sarah found herself laughing at Singing Bird's exaggerated gestures, playing with the camp children who had overcome their initial shyness, and feeling something dangerous blooming in her chest whenever Chief Two Hawks was near. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Chief Two Hawks asked, "What do you want, Sarah Mitchell? Not what others want for you. Not what you think you should want. What calls to your spirit?" Sarah stared into the flames, considering. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to wake up without fear. I want to be seen, truly seen, not as someone's possession or project. I want to matter." Chief Two Hawks reached across the space between them and took her hand, the first time he had touched her. His skin was warm against hers. "You already matter," he said. "The question is whether you believe it." Winter settled over the prairie with fierce determination. Sarah had expected to feel trapped by the cold, confined to the lodge like she had been confined in so many other ways. Instead, she felt a strange freedom. The winter forced intimacy, drew the community closer together. In the long dark evenings, people gathered to share stories, to work on crafts, to sing songs that Sarah couldn't understand but felt in her bones. She was learning a new way of being human, one that didn't require her to shrink or hide. Chief Two Hawks had given her a name in Lakota, Tesanwi Luta, which meant Red Buffalo Woman. He explained that it came to him in meditation, that the buffalo was sacred to his people, representing abundance and survival. The red represented her courage, the blood of her past transformed into strength for her future. Sarah wore the name like armor, protection against the voices in her head that still sometimes sounded like Daniel. Thomas Whitfield sent word through a trader that Sarah's behavior was scandalous, that she was living in sin among heathens. The trader looked uncomfortable delivering the message, clearly expecting Sarah to be horrified or repentant. Instead, she laughed. The sound startled even her, rusty from disuse but genuine. "Tell Mr. Whitfield I am learning what holiness actually looks like," she said. "And it has nothing to do with his church." As winter deepened, Sarah and Chief Two Hawks spent more time together. He taught her to ride horses properly, to track animals through snow, to read the sky for coming weather. She taught him about books she had read, about music and poetry, about the world beyond the prairie. Their conversations ranged from practical to philosophical, and Sarah found herself challenged in ways she never had been before. Chief Two Hawks didn't treat her like a fragile thing that might break. He treated her like an equal, someone whose thoughts and opinions mattered. One night in January, as the northern lights danced green and purple across the sky, Chief Two Hawks spoke about his feelings. They were sitting outside despite the cold, wrapped in buffalo robes, watching the celestial display. "I did not expect you," he said quietly. "After Bright Moon died, I thought I would walk the rest of my path alone. I thought my heart had frozen like the winter ground. But you came, and something thawed. I do not know what to do with these feelings." Sarah's own heart hammered in her chest. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of you. Of myself. Of wanting something this much. Every time I've wanted something, it's been taken away or turned into something that hurt me." Chief Two Hawks turned to face her fully. "I cannot promise you will never hurt again. Pain is part of living. But I can promise I will never be the source of your pain. I can promise to see you, all of you, and honor what I see. I can promise that your voice will matter as much as mine in all decisions." The tears came again, but these were different from the tears she had cried before. These were tears of release, of allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have something good. "I care for you," she whispered. "More than I thought I could ever care for anyone again. But I need time. I need to know who I am outside of fear before I can give myself to anyone, even you." Chief Two Hawks nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time is something we have. The earth turns slowly. Seeds sleep in winter before they bloom in spring. There is wisdom in waiting." They sat together under the northern lights, not touching but connected, two wounded people learning that healing didn't mean forgetting the past but integrating it into a stronger future. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting to reveal brown grass that would soon turn green. Sarah had been with the Lakota for 4 months, and she felt like a different person. She was stronger, capable, confident in ways she never had been. The women had taught her their crafts, and she had contributed to the community's survival through the winter. She had earned her place here, not through marriage or obligation, but through her own effort and willingness to learn. In April, Chief Two Hawks came to her with a proposal. Not the kind that involved ownership or obligation, but a partnership. "I would like you to be my wife," he said. "Not because you need me or I need you, but because we choose each other. In my tradition, marriage is about two people walking the same path while remaining whole. You would keep your name, your voice, your power. I offer you my heart, freely given, with no expectation except honesty and respect." Sarah looked at this man who had offered her sanctuary when she had nowhere to go, who had taught her that strength could be gentle and gentleness could be strong. She thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Broken Creek, terrified and small, convinced she deserved nothing better than survival. She thought about the woman she had become, Red Buffalo Woman, someone who could laugh and work and dream again. "Yes," she said simply. The word felt like flying. They married in the Lakota way, with ceremonies Sarah was still learning to understand, surrounded by a community that had accepted her not despite her differences but because of them. Singing Bird wept with joy. The children sang songs. And as Sarah stood beside Chief Two Hawks, his hand warm in hers, she realized that healing hadn't been a destination but a journey. She still carried scars from her past, and probably always would. But scars were proof of survival, evidence that she had endured and overcome. That night, in the lodge they would now share, Chief Two Hawks held her gently, respecting her boundaries, letting her set the pace. "I spent so long believing I was broken," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "That love was supposed to hurt." Chief Two Hawks kissed her forehead softly. "You were never broken. You were wounded. There is a difference. Broken things cannot heal. But wounds close. They become scars that tell your story. And your story is one of survival, of courage, of a woman who refused to let cruelty define her." Sarah thought about Daniel, about the life she had fled, about the mail-order bride advertisement that had seemed like her only option. She thought about how desperate she had been, how close she had come to settling for another cage with different bars. And she thought about this unexpected path that had led her to a prairie camp, to a people who had shown her what community really meant, to a man who loved her without trying to own her. The healing wasn't complete. Healing never was. Some mornings she still woke with residual fear, expecting pain that no longer came. Some nights she still dreamed of Daniel's fists. But Chief Two Hawks was always there, patient and steady, reminding her that she was safe, that she was valued, that she was home. And slowly, day by day, season by season, Sarah learned to believe it. She learned that her painful past didn't have to dictate her future. She learned that love could be a garden instead of a battlefield. And she learned that sometimes the greatest courage was simply allowing yourself to be happy. The prairie winds sang through the grass, carrying stories of all the wounded people who had found healing in unexpected places, of all the souls who had been brave enough to choose themselves, of all the love that bloomed where hatred had tried to plant only thorns. And Sarah, Red Buffalo Woman, stood in the middle of that vast openness, finally, truly free.